lecture, The United States and the World. Today, I'd like to discuss the role of the United States in the world. Let me begin by saying that in the past few decades, there has been amazing growth in the economies of many countries around the world, including some African countries and the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, and most notably, China. In recent years, there has been a lot of attention focused on the world's two biggest economic powers, which, as you probably know, are China and the United States. Some experts are predicting that China will become the new global leader because of its size, as well as its economic and military strength. Most experts, however, also agree that both countries have serious, but very different, economic and political challenges. Of course, no one can predict how China or the United States will respond to their respective challenges over time, or which of these two world powers, if either one, will end up the more powerful nation in the long run. However, in the shorter term, it seems very likely that the United States will remain very important globally, at least for the foreseeable future. Let's take a look at what one professor of political science had to say on this topic. Professor Steve Yetive of Old Dominion University in Virginia wrote 3 articles in which he gave a number of reasons why he believes the United States will remain a global leader. Today, I'll discuss some of these reasons. In this lecture, I will take the liberty of organizing the reasons he gives into 3 categories. First, I'll talk about economic reasons. Then, I'll use the categories of hard power and soft power to discuss more of his ideas. First, let me give you some of the economic reasons Yetive gives for why the United States will probably continue to be an important player globally. First, it has enough money to help out other countries in a crisis. The crisis could be caused by a natural disaster, like a tsunami or volcanic eruption, or by the financial or political situation of a country. Second, the United States can also help maintain financial stability in the world because of the size of its economy. The United States is a huge market for other countries' goods. A third economic reason concerns the US dollar. To date, the dollar remains the closest thing to a global currency. That is, it continues to be the currency that the world trusts the most. The world still feels that the United States will repay money that it borrows. China's currency, the yuan, may not be allowed by the Chinese government to become seriously stronger. A stronger yuan would make Chinese goods more expensive and less attractive to the world market. Now, let's move on to the United States' use of what I'm describing today as hard power, that is, the threat or use of force. This force can be economic, which would include sanctions against trading with a country, or military. For better or for worse, the United States has taken on the role of keeping a certain balance of power in many parts of the world. We have seen this very obviously in the Middle East, where the United States will probably continue to protect the free flow of oil in the Persian Gulf, as it has done for decades. The world is very dependent on oil, and keeping it flowing is vital to many economies. The United States is also a member of NATO, an organization of mostly European nations devoted to keeping peace in the world. And in another part of the world, the United States has been involved in keeping the Asian balance of power between the ASEAN countries and China, for example. ASEAN countries like Indonesia and Malaysia engage in massive trade with China and may at times feel a little intimidated by China's size and power, as is often the case with the United States' much smaller neighbors. So, having a friend like the United States can be a kind of comfort to the smaller countries in Asia. This friendship, while bringing comfort to some, can of course create tensions between China and the United States. Let's move on to the United States' soft power in the world. By soft power, we mean the ability to attract or persuade a partner to do what we want, through dialogue or because of shared values. Soft power does not come from an economic or military threat, but from how attractive or persuasive a country's culture, political ideals, and policies are. Britain and France, for example, are leaders in a global move toward democracy because of their soft power, the fact that many admire their cultures and politics. The United States comes third in this ranking. If one values competitive economies, economies in which it is relatively easy for an individual to start and run a business, there are other places that have more competitive economies than the United States. Singapore, for example. But the United States has the most competitive major economy in the world and has maintained its competitiveness at the same time that some European countries have lost it. And, as we already know from a previous lecture, the United States is still a magnet to immigrants for both political and economic reasons. And although its primary and secondary education systems have problems, the United States still gets top global ratings for its colleges and universities. A lot of top scientific research is done in American universities, which lead much of the world in developing technologies like nanotechnology and biotechnology. This not only gives the United States an economic advantage, but attracts top graduate students from other countries, many of whom remain in the United States. Okay, before I finish up for today, I realize that I have presented a somewhat simplistic picture of the American role in the world. I don't have the time today to discuss the role of other major players such as the European Union, the United Nations, international business and finance, the World Trade Organization, and so many others. And you may or may not agree with Professor Yediv's analysis of why he expects the United States to remain a global power, at least for the near future. But my goal today was to give you a framework for understanding some of what you learn in the media about U.S. economic, military, and political influence in the world today.
The lecture is about role of the United States in the world. In past few decades, there has been growth in the economies of many countries around the world, including some African countries and the BRIC nations: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. There has been a lot of attention focused on the world's two biggest economic powers are China and the United States. Some experts are predicting that China will become the new global leader because of its size as well as its economic and military strength. Most experts, however, agree that both countries have serious but different economic and political challenges. In short term, uh, it seems that the United States will remain globally uh, Professor Steve, yes, Steve of Old Domination Dominance Universities in Virginia wrote three reasons uh, why United States will remain global leader. Mm, Three reasons are economic reason, hard power, and soft power. First, I talk about economic reasons. Mm, uh, United States have enough money to have other countries in crisis, uh, such as national disaster and financial or political situation. The United States maintain global finance stability because of its size and market. Um, the US dollar uh, remain the closest thing to a global currency. The world feels that United States will repay money that it borrows. China currency, the yuan, may not be allowed by the Chinese government to become stronger. Now let's move to the United States use of hard powers, that is threat or use of force. The force can be economic, would against trading with a country, or military. The United States had taken on the role of keeping a balance of power in many parts of the world. The United States will probably continue to protect the free flow of oil in the Persian Gulf. The United States is also a member of NATO. The United States has been involved in keeping the Asian balance of power between the Asian countries and China. Uh, Asian countries like Indonesia and Malaysia feel a little intimidated by China's size and power. Having a friend like the United States can be a kind of comfort to the smaller countries, but the friendship can create tensions between China and the United States. Uh, Third is soft power. By soft power, uh, the ability to attract or persuade a partner to do what they want through dialogue or sharing values. Uh, Soft power does not come from an economic or military threat, but from uh, the attraction or persuasive a country culture, political ideals, and policies. For example, Britain and France are leaders in a global move toward uh, democracy because of their soft power. The United States come third in this ranking. Um, if one values competitive economies, there are other places that have more competitive economies than the United States. Singapore, for example, but the United States has the most competitive major economy in the world and has maintained its competitiveness. The United States is still a magnet to immigrants for political and economic reasons. The United States will get top global rating for its colleges and universities. A lot of top scientific research is done in American universities, which lead to the development in technologies like nanotechnology and biotechnology. Uh, this gives the United States an economic advantage and attracts top graduate students from other countries. Mm, The goal of the lecture is give framework of understanding some uh, U.S. economic, military, and political influence in the world today.